Power Grid.
Koti hii imewapata na hatia na mkiwa mkuridhika na uamuzi wa koti mko na siku 14 za kurudisha apili.
Kenya Power hailipi mtu yoyote kulispace ili kuweka transformers kwa shamba. Hakuna mtu anafaa kupigia for any deals.
Kwanza nakata hii simu na naripoti sai.
Tumekuja kuwashika. Buda boss utamulikwa. Tumekuja kuwashika.
When did you start to marry kids?
When did I start?
When did you start to marry kids?
I don't marry kids. I marry mature women.
Who brought you that child, my daughter?
Who brought you that my daughter?
Hey, who brought you? Wewe ndio unajifanya vile unachua sana.
Sijifanyi.
Wewe ni pipi yangu.
Arda bana.
Anakuuliza wewe ni pipi yangu.
Mimi siwezi kuwa bibi yako.
Very good. Kuna mtoto yako tulipeana.
Si ni wewe ulikula deposit ya mtoto.
Si wewe na hiyo mtomo yako ukiniambia tuoze huu mtoto tupate pesa.
Mimi saa ngapi?
Kawela.
Mwezi mimi wangu atarake mtoke ngakiringangu.
Wewe mzee, mko na watoto wangapi? Wewe na huyu bibi yako.
Mwezi mtuko na watoto nani?
Na
Ikibamba
back, fresh, better than before.
And of course, bringing you great mixes, gossip, interviews from your favorite artists, both local and international.
With me, Kalondu Musimi, the baddest in the game. You better say my name, baby.
And of course, your boy Mr. Vibe Brito, the DJ.
You can only find these on
Club One Extra every Friday from 4:30 p.m.
Woo!
Tembea Kenya, ujione.
Yes, hello. Naongea na Jen.
Naongea na nani?
Yes, Jen. Tuko hapa kwako tunakata stima. Hii bili yako hujalipa.
Hai, kwani mnakata stima na Friday afternoon?
Yes, madam. Tunafanya kazi kila siku. Lakini usikuwe na wasiwasi. Hapa tunaweza saidia.
Kims nikatie stima hii weekend mimi.
Haina wasiwasi. Ukitupatia kama 2k ya lunch, tunaweza acha kukata sisi turudi ofisi.
Mimi niko na 1k tu.
Basi tuma 1500 tumalizane.
Sawa.
Umesikia? Wanajaribu kuchezea Jen hapa game rough kuruka. Sikiza. Hakuna mtu anafaa kukupigia simu akwambia ulipe kitu kidogo ama utoweka kitu ya lunch ati ndio usikatiwe stima. Na kama kuna mtu anakupigia akidai ati kwamba uko na deni, kata hiyo simu haraka.
Oh, kumbe mlikuwa mnataka tu mnione.
Tumekuja kuwashika. Buda boss utamulikwa. Tumekuja kuwashika.
Very good evening to you. In 1984, Kenya experienced one of the most severe droughts in its existence, and in response, the country was forced to import over 1 million tons of yellow maize to cushion its population. Fast forward to 2011, the country was again forced to appeal to its citizens to fundraise under the Kenya for Kenya initiative, managing close to R1 billion in cash and in kind to cushion over 3.5 million people who were in need of food aid. And things are not looking better either. Statistics from the government indicate that as of the end of January 2026, over 3 million people were food insecure, with half the country affected. And tonight, we ask when a permanent solution will be found to stop this endless drought cycle and have the country breathe. Tonight, we are bringing you a special report. Our crews are stationed across the country, and my colleague O'Brien Kemani is on the other side of the studio. O'Brien, what shall you be bringing us?
Well, many thanks indeed. Better keep tuned back there in Studio A. I mean, when you look at the pictures of the suffering that Kenyans are going through, they're completely disheartening. And tonight, we just want to focus on the mitigation measures and, of course, track the history of drought in this country, the steps we have taken as a country to address these, and, of course, the way forward. The whole point is, drought is not getting better, it's getting worse. And so the question is, what is the way forward? That is a conversation that I shall be having with the CS in charge of public service and special programs, Geoffrey Ruku, together with Dr. Ahmed Idris, the Secretary General of Kenya Red Cross Society. It's a conversation that you can't afford to miss. Stay right here. Back to you. Better keep tuned.
Thank you, O'Brien. Of course, we shall be looking forward to that particular conversation. And remember that we have our teams across the country. One is in Tana River County. There is a team in Turkana County, Wajir County, as well as a town hall from Kitui County. But first, here is a look at what we will be bringing you this evening. This is our plea. As drought ravages Turkana County. Silent bells and empty desks. Learning grounds to a halt in Wajir County as parents and pupils move in search of food. And carcass and stench. Dead animals litter Mandera County as locals brace for the worst drought in decades. Welcome to this special report on the drought situation in the country. And as I had informed you earlier, my colleagues are on standby across the country. We have the Wajir team, the Tana River team, the Kitui County team, who shall be bringing us a town hall where citizens will be sharing their stories as well as asking their questions to the panel that O'Brien will be hosting there. They are on your screen. John Jacob Kioria, Farah Yusuf, and Simon Achola will be bringing us reports throughout this particular bulletin, so do stand by for that. My name is Betty Kiptum, and Lucy Moura is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Now, drought conditions have deteriorated rapidly since January 2026 following the failure of the October-December 2025 short rains. An estimated 3.3 million people are currently facing acute food insecurity, with the number expected to rise to 3.6 million by June 2026 if urgent intervention is not taken. In response, the government has released 4.1 billion shillings to scale up response interventions across affected regions.
Official government data shows the counties of Mandera, Wajir, Kwale and Kilifi as the worst hit by the ongoing drought and requiring urgent attention. Baringo, Garissa, Kajiado, Kitui, Lamu, Samburu, Taita Taveta, Tharaka Nithi, Isiolo, Turkana, Marsabit and West Pokot counties are classified under the alert phase, most of them on a worsening trajectory. The drought situation is also threatening counties outside the arid and semi-arid areas such as Embu, Nyeri and Meru. Acute malnutrition continues to rise in this period, affecting over 810,000 children and 104,000 pregnant and lactating women, alongside other vulnerable groups. To mitigate the situation, the Cabinet authorized the release of 4.1 billion shillings to scale up response interventions across affected regions.
Hii shida ya njaa, shida ya kiangazi, mwaka nenda miaka rudi, dawa yake kamili ni kuhakikisha kwamba tunajenga dam, tunafanya irrigation, and Northern Kenya has the potential and capacity to contribute in the food security of our nation. And that is my plan.
In total already, we are talking of in excess of 10 billion shillings that this administration has released and will continue releasing on a month-by-month basis until we get into full recovery.
The additional funding will supplement allocations made in December 2025 and January 2026, which supported relief food, logistics and limited non-food assistance. While the numbers surge, the government insists that it is firmly in control, heavily relying on data-driven planning, sustained food distribution and long-term infrastructure investment to mitigate the impact of a drought and to protect lives.
The reason why I identified matters water harvesting, water storage and irrigation as a primary food security intervention, and we want to bring 2.5 million acres under irrigation. Most of it will be here in Northern Kenya because you have the land, you have the rivers, and we are going to make sure that it happens here in Northern Kenya so that Northern Kenya can equally contribute to the food security of the nation.
President Ruto, for the first time, has come up with a permanent solution to the drought situation by introducing the National Infrastructure Fund that is going to help us build enough dams to harvest enough water to put more land under irrigation.
John Jacob Curia, Prime Edition.
Now, failure of the short rain season of October, November to December last year is expected to make the situation worse, with the expected below average rainfall in most of the pastoralist regions of the country. In the recently released long rain seasonal forecast of March, April to May, the Kenya Meteorological Department is urging for anticipatory action so as to cushion vulnerable communities from the vagaries arising from the drought.
The failure of the short rain season and the expected depressed rainfall in most parts of the country is expected to make the bad situation worse. According to Kenya Met Department, the country is facing a season of both good rains in the agriculturally potential areas and poor rainfall in the pastoralist regions of the country. The acting director of Kenya Met, Edward Muriuki, while announcing the forecast during the 12th National Climate Outlook Forum held in Nairobi, said near average to below average rainfall is expected over the southeastern lowlands, northeastern and parts of northwestern Kenya.
Occasional heavy rainfall events are also likely to occur in several parts of this region.
The forecast further indicated that below average rainfall is expected over the coastal region in the counties that include Mombasa, Kilifi, and parts of Tana River County.
The season is expected to be characterized by a normal to late onset with intermittent dry spells. However, occasional heavy rainfall events are likely to occur in some parts of the country.
However, above average rainfall is expected in parts of the northwestern region in Turkana and Samburu counties.
Turkana and Samburu counties, rainfall is likely to be near average to above average. Occasional heavy rainfall events are likely to occur in a few areas.
Competition for water and pasture by pastoralists could flare up into conflicts.
Most of our country, over 80% of our country is arsals. So those areas are likely to experience drought, resource-based conflicts over water, over pasture, then human-wildlife conflict.
Climate scientists are urging for anticipatory action through programs aimed at cushioning vulnerable communities from the vagaries arising from the below-average rainfall in the affected regions of the country.
In the crop subsector, we anticipate that we'll have poor germination. In some places, we'll be having crop failure, thus reducing the yields as expected.
We will be having continuous monitoring of the water resources, the rivers, and the groundwater, and also the water quality. We will be mapping of the available water sources, which is very important in the areas that will be water scarce.
While the La Nina phenomena has been weakening and the Indian Ocean dipole back to neutral, it will take some time before the effects of the two weather systems dissipate. Opicho Chemtai for Prime Edition.
Now, over 350,000 households in Turkana County are on the brink of drought as it continues to wreak havoc in the vast region. Children in the area are facing malnutrition, and the Red Cross Society is warning of a humanitarian catastrophe in the coming days if no interventions are put in place. Achola Simon reports from Turkana County.
23-year-old Nancy Awoy makes a now customary walk from her Manyatta house to the nearby fresh grave. Tightly clutched in her arms is a 6-month-old infant, suckling perhaps the last drop of milk. The child in her arms is perhaps the hope she literally holds on. The fresh grave, a stark reality of what awaits if help does not come immediately.
We have around 200,000 households which are in need of food, immediately in need of food.
Njaa ilifanya hata aende, asa hata chakula akakosa, mbuzi, mfua, akaenda. Tunabaki tu hapa tu vile tuko tu hivi.
She says the 5-year-old died after days of starvation. The day she left her home to look for food, she came back to a dead child.
Mimi nikaenda tena huku. Kutafuta, karudi, nikapata basi tu njaa kaumia.
3 months since the disaster struck, the family remains hopeless, perhaps waiting for the inevitable.
Tunaomba basi na Jakatao kama anakuja kunisaidia, akuje tu anisaidie tu sisi tu hapa. Sisi tunaumia hapa. Watu wote tu tunaumia.
Nancy is part of the 350,000 households that face starvation and are literally on the brink in the vast Turkana County. Temperatures here oscillate between 37 and 39. The heat literally squeezing every drop of water from the atmosphere. The withering plantation and the dry riverbeds attempt to tell the story. However, it is the deserted villages and the starving community that paint the true picture of devastation this community has gone through since it last rained over a year ago.
Watu wameenda kutafuta, wale wanaweza na wale hawawezi. Mambo ya hapa ni tofauti. Jua ni kali, hapa watu njaa inamaliza kwa sababu hakuna.
Haya maji pia tunachota mbali. Tukichota maji mbali mpaka huku kifua inaumia. Hakuna hata nini. Hospitali pia unaenda tena kama basi hujakata sha. Wanakurudisha basi. Kwa sababu hakuna pesa yenye unaweka sha. Si wanasema muweke 300 kwa sha. Utapata hiyo 300 wapi?
Ukame imezidi kabisa. Mali ile watu wako na watoto amehama upande wa Uganda huko, wengine amehama Sudan, wengine amehama upande sijui ya Alakatanga huko. Lakini sisi wengine hapa tunakaa tu.
The hard hit areas include Turkana South, North and East. Families are now forced to brave long queues in the punishing heat to access water. Like human beings, the long dry spell has left animals rummaging for anything available. Most families have lost tens and hundreds of their livestock as the drought persists. At Nancy's home, we found the last standing goat, too weak to survive. The livestock pen, once hosting over 200 goats, now lies empty. Skins from slaughtered goats dot the entire compound. The family slaughters at least a goat a day, not out of volition, but forced by the ongoing drought that has claimed hundreds of thousands of livestock in the region.
When you look at the cycle of disaster, it is a cycle that it's after 3 years we go back to drought. After 2 years we go back to drought. It is a climate change. It's how we are going to empower the community or strengthen the community in terms of to be resilient, or even to plant the trees, to plant the food that it can be a drought resistant. We can look at the animals that can be a drought resistant. I can say that one can help us.
Achola Simon, Prime Edition, Turkana County.
Well, quite some heartbreaking scenes there from Turkana County, and Achola Simon has been on the ground since the start of this week, and he has filed quite some reports for KBC Channel 1, and we want to link up with him now. He's currently in Lodwar, where he shall be telling us. There he is on your screen. Achola, do update us on what you have seen this past week as you've been covering the drought in Turkana.
In the course of our 3-day stay here in Turkana County, 3 things have actually constantly come up in each and every conversation that we've actually had with the locals as we traversed the villages in Loima, Napelelim, and of course Namayana. Some of the things that locals told us that the elderly, especially men and women, and of course the children, were at a greater risk. They say that those that can actually not move out of their homes and actually go and look for food, they're at a greater risk. The other thing that they also pointed out was that their livestock were dying at a greater rate. The other thing they also told us is that they are hoping that the government and of course non-governmental organizations can actually come up quickly and actually ensure that they can actually get resources towards ensuring that they salvage the situation. Some of those issues were actually corroborated by the Red Cross Society of Kenya when we went there to actually seek data of exactly what was happening here, and they said it is true, people were actually starving, and there was need for actually concerted effort from non-governmental organizations and of course also governmental organizations in terms of ensuring that they put together resources so that then they salvage the situation. That basically sums up our stay here in Turkana County, and of course we'll be keeping a keen eye on exactly what will be happening going forward in terms of just ensuring that indeed this community can actually be assisted. I also want to point out that there's been heightened activities, especially from the county government of Turkana, where we are reliably informed that officers have actually been dispatched to various villages, especially in areas that have been adversely affected, in terms of just ensuring that indeed those that are affected, first and foremost, they can actually ascertain the veracity of the situation, but also find solutions to the problem. We were expecting today that the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service, Human Capital and Special Programs, Geoffrey Ruku, would actually be on the ground in terms of, because that is what we had actually been told. But of course, that program changed. And of course, as I said, this is something that we'll be keeping a keen eye on, so that then we get to see what will happen going forward. But also key in conclusion is the fact that each and every person that I've actually talked to, they've said that there's need for the powers, the government, and of course the non-governmental organization to find lasting solutions. Whereas this relief food will actually be coming, what they're insisting on is that there's need to ensure that indeed permanent solutions are put in place because they said that this tragedy is cyclic. After every 3 years, it's going to come back again, and there's need to actually ensure that efforts are put in place to ensure that they put to a stop the suffering that people of Turkana have suffered over the years.
Thank you, Achola Simon. They are coming to us from Turkana County. Of course, those questions need to be answered, and I will throw it now to my colleague O'Brien Kimani, who is standing by on the other side of the studio to bring us a conversation with a Kenya Red Cross official. O'Brien Kimani, take it over.
Appreciated. Better keep tuned back there in Studio A. Quite a disheartening situation happening in a number of counties, and that's why we are here, so that we can discuss these ongoing catastrophe and of course ask tough questions and try to find a solution. We are still waiting for the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service and Special Programs, Geoffrey Ruku. The seat here is reserved for him, the seat in the middle. But of course, we are privileged to have the Secretary General of the Kenya Red Cross Society. This is Dr. Ahmed Idris. He has extensively covered drought in this country. He has been doing this since the year 2008. And so you can be guaranteed that he knows a thing or two about drought. Dr. Idris, thank you very much indeed for joining us. In terms of severity and longevity, how would you rate the ongoing drought here in Kenya?
I think the general viewpoint is it's difficult to make a comparison between droughts because there are a number of different variables that can make a particular drought situation worse than another. What makes this particular drought for we're experiencing now in 2026 particularly problematic is because the period of recovery that the communities have had between the previous drought and this drought has been extremely short. Kenyans will recall, I think we had one of the worst droughts in 2022-2023 period. And you can imagine the same communities are now facing another drought barely 2 years after they were completely affected by that drought. So the period of recovery has been extremely short. That has made the situation worse for the communities.
And when we talk about the situation being worse, what are we talking about?
So we're talking about one, the purchasing power of communities is much lower. Remember the arid and semi-arid areas, the communities mostly rely on pastoralism for their livelihoods. And that is the idea that they keep animals, they grow them, they sell them, and they use the proceeds as income for the other activities in their lives. So whenever their herd capacity is lower, the number of animals that they have to sell is much fewer, and the price of these animals drops, then the overall ability to sustain life gets complicated. So the first one is we have a compromised purchasing power of these communities. The second one is because the level of pasture and availability of water is extremely low, the animal production capacities are also much lower. So we're talking about milk scarcity, and these are communities that also rely primarily on the products from the animals for their food consumption. So lower milk availability in these areas. But finally, I think the main one is the prices of food also goes up whenever we have drought. And so when you combine low purchasing power and increase in the prices of food, then for a number of these communities and families, food becomes something that is out of reach. So they don't have enough resources to buy from the market. So the series of issues, including animal dying off, makes the communities much more vulnerable. They're unable to access food, they're unable to purchase food, and that compromises their lives entirely.
Are we likely to get to Singapore destination by the year 2055 when we are still facing this kind of drought situation in the country?
It's a difficult question to answer. My take, or our take generally, we have to improve the collective lives and livelihoods of communities as a whole. I think if we get that right, if we increase the income of families, if we increase the purchasing power of communities, if we diversify their livelihoods, at the end of the day, the issues of drought is something that we can survive. What is the main problem that is facing communities? It's not just the lack of rain. It is the fact that when these rains come, they're coming, or when there is lack of rains, it is affecting communities that have gone through a historical period of poverty. These communities are extremely poor. So any small tilt that affects their livelihood sends them to the brink of poverty, to a worse situation. So if we are looking at an improvement of the economy, the overall improvement of the economy, it cannot be achieved if we also do not address the livelihoods of these communities that are affected by drought persistently, and that is the pastoralist community. So we are talking about an improvement of how we support the livestock sector as a whole. It is a sector that has a huge potential for these communities and for the country as a whole in terms of the overall contribution to the GDP. That is a sector that if we design the policy architecture right, if we support the growth of the livestock sector, if we support the growth of external markets for animals for these communities, maybe Singapore will not be a long dream. It is something that can
It's not likely to be a long shot. Yeah. Let's first of all get things out. I mean, going through a drought is a normal phenomenon, you know, the world over. And when you look at the World Drought Severity Index, I mean, Kenya is rated as one of the top 10 countries. I mean, you also have other countries like South Africa, you have Australia, you have Turkey, you have Saudi Arabia, and so much. But what makes these countries different from us is how we respond and what we and the kind of drought mitigation measures that we have put in place to lessen the severity and the impact of drought. From where you stand as a Secretary General of Kenya Red Cross Society, what are we missing that we need to put in place to ensure that we lessen the severity of drought and the impact?
So before I answer your question, I'll just take it a point further. What makes it particularly problematic for us in this part of the world, as we said, it's not the lack of rain, it is the impact that it has on the communities, are two things. One is the accumulated risks that these communities face. So these are communities that face not just lack of rain, they face insecurity, they face disease outbreak, they face the impact of long-term poverty. So the first point that we have to address is that accumulated risks that are facing this community is something that we have to reduce. The totality of risks as a whole. The second thing is, if we do not put the needs of this community at the center of the development planning cycle, then we will always be getting this wrong. Climate risk is one thing. Climate risk mitigation and planning has to be centralized within the development planning agenda of the country. We have to know, for example, as we distribute resources, as we allocate resources, as we adopt the policy architecture for development, then we have to have a special attention for these communities that are likely to be affected, in a worse form than the other communities by climate risk and climate change. So placing the climate risk planning at the heart of development planning cycle, that is one point. Second is reducing the accumulated risks that these communities face. But third and most importantly, I think it is this entire discussion that we have around participatory planning, so that we plan and respond to what these communities need most.
Before we go for the break, I just want to hear this from you in 30 seconds, because we also need to go to Kitui, where a town hall is underway. When you look at, since 2016, the country established the National Drought Management Authority. When you look at the way it is responding, or the way it has responded to drought, are you satisfied that it is doing the right thing at the right time?
I think we're headed in the right direction. There's a lot of room for improvement. I think for all of us, public institutions, not just the National Drought Management Authority, all of us, there's a huge room for improvement in how we plan for and respond to drought.
Very well.
And the one that we need to get right is every time we have a forecast that the rains are going to fail, we have to allocate resources, we have to start planning very early on. Anticipatory action is something that maybe the rest of the world are getting right. They are planning around forecast. Perhaps we are not doing the best in terms of that.
Very good. Well, if you're just joining us, we're giving you a special coverage of the ongoing drought here in Kenya, the impact it is having on the Kenyan society, and the economic impact of drought. We have our reporters on the ground from Kitui to Tana River to Wajir and of course to Turkana, giving you real-life experience of Kenyans and how they're coping with the ongoing drought. We'll be taking you to Kitui for the town hall, but first of all, we're taking a short break, and thereafter we'll take you to Kitui.
Habari ndugu, unaongea na Geoffrey hapa.
Habari Geoffrey.
Mimi nakupigia kuhusu ile request yako ya kupata connection ya stima. Sisi tunaweza kufanyia deal, ulipe pesa kidogo tu na sisi tukuharakishie connection yako.
Utanisaidia sana bwana Geoffrey.
Sisi tutafanya mambo iwe rahisi. Kwa kawaida utalipa 100,000 na utangojea siku mingi. Lakini ukitoa 20,000 saa hii tunakuconnectia ukuwe na stima hata kesho.
Natuma saa hii.
We, hao matapeli wamekuja sana. Connection ya stima hufuata process. Hakuna shortcut. Shortcut ni ya wakora. Malipo yote ya Kenya Power hupitia channels rasmi peke yake.
We mzee, hizo ni gani unajaribu kunifanyia?
Tumekuja kuwashika, muda boss utamulikwa. Tumekuja kuwashika.
Najua hutaki huruma, lakini mimi ni babako na nikikuona hivi nasikia uchungu sana.
Ametunyang'anya baba kisha walia haki.
Utatambua lini kwamba umefilisika?
Hebu ondoka ama mimi mwenyewe nije nikuondoe.
Bila msamaha sisi ni wanyama.
Lakini nani wa kumsamehe mwenzangu?
Nyote.
Sote? Mimi nimekosea wapi? Nadhani umeanza kutoka na akili yako Hawa. Usipomwambia aondoke nitakuzaba makofi. Hawa. Nimechoka na upuzi wako.
Welcome back. You are watching a special report on the drought situation in the country. And of course, remember, you can interact with us on our socials. We are at KBC Channel 1 across the social media platforms. My personal Twitter handle is @BettyKiptum. We shall be sampling some of your views during this particular broadcast. Now, we want to head to Kitui County, which is one of the counties that is affected by drought. Our reporters team has been there this whole week. John Jacob Kuria is standing by to bring us the report from Kitui County, as well as a town hall that will be asking some very pertinent questions. John Jacob Kuria, take it over.
Good evening. Thank you, Betty. We're live from the Kitui Multipurpose Hall in Kitui Central of Kitui County. Kitui County is one of the counties affected by the ongoing drought. About 188,000 people are in dire need of relief from government. And we're going to discuss the problem as is and the solutions as proposed. I have two stakeholders here. One of them is the Kitui Central Member of Parliament, the Honorable Makali Mulu, who also wears the hat of being a member of the Budget Committee. So as we talk about government response, we'll also see how government really, or rather how the planning in terms of budget reallocation has been. I also have the County Commissioner of the Kitui County, that is Erastus Mbui, who also joins us live on set. We also have a live audience with us. There's a mini town hall, and at some point we'll be giving them time to ask questions, probably to the guests in studio or the ones here as we discuss the drought situation in Kitui. First of all, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, sir.
I will start with you, Mheshimiwa Makali, before the County Commissioner describes the situation for us. And from a national perspective, being a member of a budget committee, in terms of response by government in this drought time, do you think as Parliament you had allocated enough money? Was the government prepared to adequately respond to this emerging humanitarian crisis?
Yeah, thank you. Let me start by welcoming the KBC team to Kitui Central, or Kitui Town in particular, the Kitui Central constituency, which is also in Kitui County. As you ask, I'm sure all of us were not aware that the drought will be this severe. I know the basis of that, I will not be able to say whether we've allocated enough money, but what I know is there is money. So what we normally do every year is we do our budgets, is that there is also what we call the contingency fund. Contingency fund is a fund which is provided in the Constitution. And the money you put in that fund is supposed to address national emergencies. So the law says you can allocate up to a maximum of 10 million, but then it depends on what the Cabinet Secretary Treasury allocates on an annual basis. So this particular financial year, the amount allocated is 2 billion at the national level. But at the same time, if you look at the county government, the law also makes provision that as the county governments make their budget, you allocate 5% emergency. So you realize there's some money at the national level, there's some money at the county level, which is supposed to address emergencies when they arise. Now, the question is that money enough, as we are discussing? Depending on the scope of what we are discussing, the money might not be enough. But our Constitution also makes another provision. It says, Article 223, it provides what we call a supplementary budget. And the government is mandated through a constitutional provision to use money which has not been appropriated by Parliament and come to Parliament later for approval or legalization. So you realize that even though the amount might be in the budget and there's not enough, but the government has that free hand to say, because of the drought in the country now, Treasury can spend more money than in the budget and then come to Parliament for us to approve. And I want to tell you, for the many years I've been in Parliament, members of Parliament have always approved resources which have been spent by the executive before approval, so long as those resources are used for national emergencies. So I want to assure Kenyans that the executive cannot always use money and come to Parliament for approval. And members of Parliament will be more than willing to approve. And only under one condition, it is a national emergency.
Which
and
we have
I do believe drought is a national emergency.
Which has not been declared just yet.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk to the county commissioner, Kitui County, and probably localize the conversation this evening. You were telling us about 188,550 people are in dire need, particularly in Kitui County. Yes. How are you responding to ensure, first of all, there is equity in the distribution of relief to these people that badly need it?
Thank you for the question. First of all, the tabulation is based on constituencies, with the most affected being Mwingi North with 39,961, or 691, 39,691, and the least affected is Kitui Central with 6,260. In between the other 6, because there are 8 constituencies, but in terms of sub-counties, national government sub-counties, we have around 19 of them in Kitui. And on various times since November, at least the government has been able to distribute around 300 bags of rice and 260 beans. And that is on the minimum, at least. And this one is supposed to target those who are most affected, those in immediate need of relief supply, so that at least they can afford a meal a day. And on top of that, we have been collaborating with the county government in what we call county steering committee, which we co-chair with the governor. And that's in concurrence with what Mheshimiwa is saying, that the county government has some funds allocated for emergencies, and the bigger burden goes to the national government. We were able to do our estimate through guidance by National Drought Management Authority, and that's how we arrived at the figure to advise the national government, and plans are underway to continue supplying food to the needy areas as per how they deserve, depending on the magnitude of the problem that they're having. It will be targeting the 19 sub-counties. So that's one of the interventions. Of course, there are others, including cash transfer for the vulnerable groups. We have 39,000 beneficiaries who were identified before. There is also the distribution of relief during the period since November has costed around 124 million
in Kitui County.
In Kitui County. what has been delivered here. And I think you are also able to verify from the ground that indeed fund has been received. And also the money that goes to the vulnerable kids, targeting the children, which is also around 15,000 across the country. So there are various efforts that are being done by the government to address the issue.
Okay, fantastic. Mheshimiwa Makali, Kitui is vast, a very vast county. And that is why I was asking the question of adequacy and fairness and equity in distribution. Do you think the government response from your own assessment has shown readiness to respond to that emerging humanitarian crisis in Kitui County?
From where I sit, I think the issue of drought, and you know, normally what happens in drought, it leads to famine or lack of food, because normally the rains will have failed. So, in terms of being ready, the way I look at this problem, and to us who live in this county and the neighboring counties, these issues are historical. If you look at the history of Kitui, you realize that drought is nothing new. Almost every 2 years, we go through this. And actually, you'll be surprised. Already droughts have been documented in Kenya. They moved back all the way to 1923. And if you ask the old men here, they will tell you that some of our elders, those old days were not able to say when they were born. Like now, if you ask me, I will say I was born this date, this month. And the only thing which would determine when you were born was droughts which were actually named after them. So someone would say, you are Katongelele, so to me, this thing of drought is nothing new to us. And that's why we see, anytime we look at the government, we see a deliberate way or move of not addressing our problem.
Okay.
I want to share some experience. I did work in Sudan at some point as a consultant. And you realize that Sudan is a desert, more than Kitui. It's a total desert. What have they done? They have used the River Nile, which comes from this country, originates from Lake Victoria. Yeah. They have done a tunnel, very long tunnel, about 1,000 kilometers. And they get the water from River Nile all the way interior to their land. And that's the water they are using to plant sugar, which we buy from them, which is even cheaper than our sugar. So why am I saying this? I'm saying, when I look at the history of this country, there has been a deliberate move. And I think if you know the history of the country, we used to have what we used to call this seasonal paper #1, which is on African socialism and its application to economic planning. Now, what did that policy paper do? That policy paper deliberately decided that public resources will be targeted to high potential areas. We don't belong to that category, high potential areas. And majority of the country was marginalized. And even as we talk about high potential areas in this country, you must get this fact right. These are statistics.
Yeah.
Kenya as a country is 80% dry, arid and semi-arid, 20% high potential, which means we are talking about 20% of the Kenya as a country taking more than 80% of the resources. So over time, we have been marginalized as a region. And that's why you see, in Ukambani, we should not be talking about lack of food. We have Tana River, we have Tana River, stretching between our land. Now, imagine if the government deliberately decided to lay the infrastructure for irrigation, so that we have a tunnel running from Tana River coming into Kitui, another coming from the river coming into Kitui, and then they let the county government do the small channels going to the farms. This area where you are seated, you'll be surprised. We can do 3 crops in a year.
All right. I want to hear the county commissioner's response, because I mean, you've been here before. Again, you came back,
yes,
so probably you were familiar very much with it.
But before you come, let me just conclude this point. What I was saying is, when you look at Kitui, Kitale, which is the basket for food in this country, they plant January, they harvest September. In Kitui, we plant in November. By February, like now we are harvesting. Which means you can plant again March, harvest June. And plant June, harvest November. So in reality, if we had water, we will feed this country. We don't need to feed even Kitui.
Let's think about inaction. And when I talk about inaction, I'm talking about the national government and the county governments, because it's a shared role in terms of preparing for the future.
It's something that we've been working for. And currently we have a program that we call the 20 projects, that is towards ending drought emergencies. And what we are doing with that project is trying to manage what we refer to as arid and semi-arid areas, so that the economic activities that we do there can be more beneficial and more friendly to the environment, managing the numbers, especially the livestock, and also having the right breed, of course the right pastures, depending on the climate of the particular area, and also planning in terms of provision of water for irrigation. Of course, priority has been to drinking water, but currently we have the Thwaken Dam under construction, we have Uman Dam under construction, and there is one that is in the pipeline, that is the Grand Falls, which is between at the border of Kitui County and the Rakanithi. These are meant to end the perennial droughts, water scarcity problems within this region, and also improve in terms of agricultural activities, because the Grand Falls is meant also to be used for irrigation other than production of power. There are also other aspects in terms of value addition, so that we can also be able to provide lines to value and whatever is being produced within the county. The county government and national government are doing an aggregation center at Kanyonyo, which is meant to encourage processing of whatever is produced from within Kitui. Of course, we are also supporting the vaccination process to improve our breeds, and also supporting the farmer in terms of insurance covers to cover them from the drought losses. These are some of the activities that we are jointly doing with the county government, so that we can cushion the farmer in case of any droughts, and also try to end over dependence on rains, and also try to modify our way of farming and ensure that we can produce, as Mheshimiwa is saying, throughout the year.
All right. At this point, probably, Mheshimiwa Makali, because we shall introduce the story shortly. I want us to talk about the turnaround story, because Kitui County suffers a tragedy in both when there is sun and when there is rain. Because not long ago we were talking about the number of people who died being swept downstream during the floods down here in Nzaoni. You can't explain that paradox of a county that suffers during the sun, and then 2 months down the line it rains, and there is no trace of where that water goes. What kind of picture does that paint, and how do we turn around such a story, particularly in counties like Kitui, Tana River, and all these other counties?
Actually, if you look at the master plan for development of dams in this country, the government had very good plans to build big dams along some of these big rivers. And the idea was to be able to stop the water from going to the ocean and use that water to do irrigation, or for either livestock use or domestic use. Now, what has happened over time? Most of these UD dams have remained on paper. They have never been done. If you drive about 3 kilometers from here, you find Uman Dam, just next to the town here. It has been there since 2008. How many years have we from 2008? About 18 years. It has never been completed. If that dam was completed, it would provide water to this town, and it will do irrigation, that part of the town. But it has never been completed. So I see a situation where the government is very good at saying we will do, but when it comes to doing, they don't do. I just want to give you an example from what the commissioner said. We have an institution called National Drought Management Authority in this country. If you look at that authority, because it's a parastatal, the main objective or their main role is to be able to predict emergencies like what we are going through, come up with mitigating measures, and prepare the country. Provide what we do early warning systems, so that by now, they should have been able to tell the country late last year that from our analysis, this country will be going through this level of drought. Yesterday we were discussing that institution, and actually we were saying, more likely we deny them budget. Because we are giving them money, which is taxpayers' money, and they're not preparing the country for drought.
Okay.
So I think time has come when people must be accountable. If you are given a responsibility and you are not performing as per the expectation of that office, I think you agree with me. It's good you pave way, other people come in. Otherwise, we'll have a country where we keep on talking. These days, I'm sure you are aware, in the old days, ukiuliza these guys watakwambia, mlijua mtu alikuwa anaitwa Gwata Francis, mnamjua? Alikuwa anasema kesho mvua itanyesha saa hii, weather itakuwa namna hii. Alafu inakataa kunyesha. Si mnamjua? Siku hizi because of technology, you can be able to predict what will happen tomorrow at 1. They say it will rain tomorrow at 1 and by 1 inaanguka. Mnaona? Wanasema kesho asubuhi kutakuwa na jua. Unakuta it is this jua. So with this kind of technology, it means we can use technology to predict our weather, predict the climate, and prepare for eventualities like what we are going through.
All right.
Boss.
Quite interesting.
Which I think we are not doing as a country.
All right. Nancy Kware was down Kitui South constituency in a place called Muda and down towards Musenge. There's an emerging issue there, and that is the issue of security. When you have illegal herders coming to Kitui and obviously causing yet another conflict that raises above security questions. And we'll pose that question later to the County Commissioner. But first of all, that story by Nancy Kware.
Kitui County has been listed among counties affected by drought, leaving close to 200,000 people in dire need of food.
There has been relief food brought in from the Special Programs Ministry. It may not be adequate, but at least we try to target the most needy, those who will not survive without that kind of assistance.
Over 100 kilometers away from Kitui town, our endeavors lead us to Musenge area in Kitui South constituency. Here, it is not just about hunger, but also about survival. Residents from 3 villages of Thangilani, Cheni and Kipuyo are decrying constant attacks by camel herders fleeing drought from other counties.
Mwaka uliopita ilikuwa tarehe 20 mwezi wa Januari. Walinikuta kwa shamba yangu wakati walipopika, nikawauliza kwa nini nyinyi mnaleta gamia hapa kwa shamba yangu. Wakati nilikuwa najaribu kupika gamia itoke karibu na shamba, basi akatoa kisu yake, akanitunga wapi? Hapa, nikaanguka chini.
Walikuja wakachoma nyumba za watu karibu nyumba 10. Wenyewe wana makao, wakakimbilia usalama mahali pengine na hata hawana chakula. Chakula ilichomwa yote.
According to those affected, the herders have turned their farms into feeding grounds for their camels.
Ukipika hiyo gamia itoke kwa shamba, wanaanza maneno mengine mbaya. Kuambia wacha gamia kule. Hii ni machani ya Mungu, hata ardhi ni ya Mungu, na hakuna mtu anaweza kuomba ardhi. Yule anaweza kuomba ardhi ni Mwenyezi Mungu.
Hiyo mtu akisema hivyo na akona bunduki, akona rungu, utamfanyia nini? Wewe unanyamaza, unamwachia. Chakula yote inakuliwa na ngamia.
The situation has forced the locals to flee their homes. These are some of the makeshift structures where affected families are seeking refuge. They have been enduring cold nights and sure of when the next attack will happen.
Usiku kuna kuwa na baridi. Hiyo ni shida moja. Kuna nyoka za chini. Kuna miti wanaweza ndungwa na nini wakati wa kukimbia tukia na tochi. Watoto sasa hivi wanaenda shule lakini wanaenda tu akiongopa.
Imagine mtoto amelala kichakani, nafikiria kesho atakuja shule akiwa sawa. Kwa hivyo wengine wakilala msituni hawakuji shule.
The land this side is private. And that is what we've been trying to sensitize the camel hunters. But for crops, there have been interventions, even arresting those camels. But when it comes to bringing in the experts who can build a case and describe probably what has been destroyed, I think we have also been having a little bit of challenge in terms of cooperation from the locals.
For Musenge residents, each day is a relentless search for food and water, and each night a cautious quest for safety. Despite the biting drought, the area locals are also forced to deal with insecurity issues, even as they hold on to hope that one day peace shall prevail, enabling them to rebuild their homes. Nancy Okware reporting from Musenge area in Kitui South, Kitui County.
That's a story by Nancy Okware. The County Commissioner will be responding to that a little bit later. But first of all, because we have audiences inside this hall, Nancy Okware, over to you. You can engage a few of them.
Thank you so much, John Jacob Kioria, na bila shaka kama ulivyosema kuna wananchi ambao wamekuwa na utulivu na wamekuwa hapa tayari tu kutoa mchango wao na vile vile kusema tu ni yapi ambayo wanahisi anastahili kufanywa ili kuhakisha tatizo kama hili linakamilika humu nchini, ama suluhu ni zipi. Na nitaanza tu na wewe, utatazama upande huu. Utueleze kwanza jina lako na pengine swali lako ama mchango wako kwenye mazungumzo haya leo.
Asante sana. Majina yangu ni Mark Ndete. Yangu ni maoni, serikali itafute njia ya permanent ambayo itaweza kusuluhisha jambo la ama shida ya ukame katika kaunti ya Kitui, ndiposa wananchi waweze kuishi maisha mazuri. Asante.
Asante sana kwa mchango wako. Pia nitakuwa naelekea upande huu. Pengine tukianza na wewe, utasimama tu kidogo. Kisha utatueleza jina lako, utatazama tu upande huu. Tueleze jina lako, ikiwa una swali ama mchango wako ni upi.
Kwa majina naitwa Mariam Mahmud, mimi ni mkazi wa hapa Kitui Town. Nimefurahia kwamba leo hii MP wangu kwamba yuko katika budget ya committee ya Drought. Lakini la kushangaza ni kwamba tumekuwa tukiona ukame kila wakati. Naye amekuwa miongo mitatu na ana maoni. Nimemuona leo kwamba yuko na maoni. Yeye kama kiongozi, yeye ndiye tegemeo letu. Vipi atakavyofanya tuone kwamba hili baada njaa halitukabili sisi hapa. Kweli sisi watu wa town hatuna mashamba, lakini tuko na mashamba nje ya town. Tuliona hivi majuzi kulikuwa na replacement ya mbuzi. State Department ya Livestock waliwahi kutuletea, ambapo PS wa Livestock Jonathan Mweke alileta mifugo. Mtu mmoja alikuwa akipata mbuzi, replacement ya mbuzi 5, lakini kimimi haikututosha na ilifikia wachache, ambapo baada njaa likiingia na tufikia wengi. So mimi ninavyo, swali langu ni kwamba kwa viongozi ambapo tuko naye Bwana Makali kama ndiye MP wetu hapa, yeye kipindi hicho mbuzi 5 tukiletewa, naye pia alitafuta wafadhili wake, alikuwa akitoa mbuzi 1. Sasa hii chakula ikifika, tunaona tunaitwa kwa chief, chakula kikitoka kwa ofisi ya county commissioner, unapata mtu anapata gorogoro moja, mtu uko na familia ya watoto 10, haitoshi.
Wacha tuchukue swali la mwisho kwa kifupi. Utaanza na jina lako, utaangalia upande huu na swali lako kwa kifupi.
Jina langu naitwa Consolata Movea. Nataka kushukuru mheshimiwa, ameongea jambo la maana sana. Amesema kama president wote wale wamekuwa katika serikali wangekuwa wameangalia hii janga la njaa la Kitui, imekuwa janga kutoka hata kabla hatujazaliwa. Na hawa mapresident wote hakuna mtu alifikiria kuchukua hiyo mto ya Tana River, mto ya Athi River, watuletee maji ili sisi tuwe tunapanda chakula ama tunapanda mboga tuweze kusaidika. Hasa nataka kumwambia mheshimiwa ajaribu sana kutusaidia hiyo kitu ifanywe, kwa sababu is coming governor. Akikuwa governor pia aingie zaidi tupate maji.
Asante. Hayo maoni ya hapa. Sasa wacha nirejeshe usukani kwake John Jacob Kioria, tuendelee na mazungumzo yetu.
Absolutely. Quite interesting questions coming in. And I'm sure you've been able to note some of the areas of response. But before we do that, because we have bills to pay, let's go back to studio, pay bills, and then come back. We shall pick up the conversation.
Naongea na Jen.
Naongea na nani?
Yes, Jen, tuko hapa kwako tunakata stima. Hii bili yako hujalipa.
Ai, kwani mnakata stima na Friday afternoon?
Yes, madam. Tunafanya kazi kila siku, lakini usikuwe na wasiwasi. Hapa tunaweza kusaidia.
When the deal is too good, think twice.
Lakini kitu moja inanishangaza na wewe.
Hii ni kuhatarisha maisha yenu nyi wenyewe na pia ya wale mnaenda kutokea kwa manyumba zao.
We are diving into the mind. Stay vigilant to get safely and legally connected to the power grid.
Koti hii imewapata na hatia, na mkiwa mkuridhika na uamuzi wa koti, mko na siku 14 za kurudisha apili.
Na kama kuna mtu anakupigia akidai ati kwamba uko na deni, kata hiyo simu haraka.
Oh, kumbe mlikuwa mnataka tu mnione.
Tumekuja kuwashika, muda bosi utamulikwa. Tumekuja kuwashika.
Way back from Kitui County, the Kitui Multipurpose Hall, we continue with this multi-stakeholder conversation regarding response to the drought. There are questions that were posed by the audience, and they will respond to them shortly. And of course, let's make the responses short because, again, also time is quite constrained. But let's begin with the story that Nancy Okware executed regarding the security situation, particularly in Kitui South, those areas of Musenge. You've had people who are complaining that they've been displaced completely by the insecurity being brought about by illegal herders who are grazing in Kitui South. How is government responding to that?
I would say that the issue of camels and Kitui South, the borderline with Tana River, has been there for a long time. And it did not only affect the Kitui South area, but also the northern part of Kitui, that is Mwingi North, Mwingi Central, especially the areas of Mwingi East and New sub-counties, and Ngomeni area in Chuso. But one of the issues that we dealt with at first, the first time I was here, was to push them back and also prosecute where we felt that there are offenses committed. Secondly, the government was able to assist us with recruitment of 250 NPRs. And in Kitui South, we have around 50 of them deployed and armed, trained, working alongside with the police officers. We also did an intervention with the county government constructing quite a number of police stations, which we are supposed to deploy officers. One that was completed is Mandogoi, and that one is in Chuso sub-county in Mwingi North. It was opened as a GSU camp, and it has been able to pacify that area. I was in Musenge area, the entire Muda, the areas that are affected by camel invasion on Friday last week. We went round and we were in agreement that the camels should be pushed to beyond Livadua.
Okay. Pushed back?
Yes.
Okay.
Towards the game reserve.
Okay.
One of the main challenges that we have is that that area borders the game reserve, and there is also a dispute as to where the boundary of the game reserve and settled areas is. The game reserve is also not well managed, and because if it were, then probably we could manage the deployment of livestock within that area. So what we are doing at the moment is just to do a pushback towards Tana River, and also the NPR are supposed to play a key role in that area. The reason as to why the other areas have been managed and not Kitui South is something that we also want to understand better, and that's why we are going back there tomorrow morning, so that we can also try to find out why things did not work well even after we had toured and given instructions last year.
Okay, quite interesting. Mheshimiwa Makali, you have two questions from your voters. very quickly.
Wacha kwanza kabla sija jibu maswali ya watu wangu hapa niongezee tu vile commissioner amesema mambo ya usalama. Usalama katika sehemu yetu ya Kitui South na along the border, sisi kama viongozi wa Kitui County tulikutana na National Integration and Cohesion Commission na tukakubaliana mambo manne walitakiwa wafanye ili tuweze kumaliza shida ya pale. Jambo la kwanza ilikuwa ni tuwekewe beacons, tujue mpaka ya Kitui na mpaka ya Tana River. Ndio mtu akiwa Kitui ajue ako Kitui na mtu akiwa Tana River ajue ako nini. Kama uko Tana River na wewe ni mgeni wetu, ukiwa uko Kitui na wewe ni wa Tana River, ujue wewe ni mgeni wetu. Na mgeni akiingia kwa wenyeji, hawezi akawa anaenda kulala bedroom. Ana behave kwa sababu ni nani? Ni mgeni. Kwa hiyo tukasema kwanza tuweke hiyo mpaka. Ya pili ni ile ya police reserve. Na nashukuru commissioner ya kwamba wao walikuja. Ya tatu tulikuwa tumesema ya kwamba tukiweka hiyo mpaka, ile police stations governor wetu Malombe amejenga, ziwekwe askari. Ndio askari wanachunga mpaka. Kufikia sasa mnajua hata wengine watu walitoka Tana River, wakavunja police station wakasema ni yao, wakang'oa mabati wakaenda nayo. Hiyo tukasema hiyo ni criminal, tungependa kuona watu wameshikwa. Hiyo ilikuwa ni jambo la tatu. Na jambo la mwisho tukasema kulingana na katiba yetu, serikali kuu inatakiwa ihakikishe kila mwananchi wa Kenya anaishi na usalama. Usalama upo. Si tulisema hivyo namna hiyo. Kwa hivyo yule mtu ana jukumu kubwa ni serikali kuu kuhakikisha kwamba hao watu wasukumwe waende mahali wanatoka. Lakini nyinyi watu wa Kitui waulize, kwa nini hao watu wanakuja huku kwetu? Si wanatafuta nyasi. Yenye na maisha sisi tuna nyasi na wao hawana nini? Tungependa kuona watu wetu wakiweka mbuzi, wakiweka ng'ombe, tutumie hiyo nyasi yetu tuweze kuendeleza uchumi wetu. Si sawa? Kwa hiyo ili kumaanisha ya kwamba sisi tukiweka mbuzi na ng'ombe tutakuwa utajiri utaingia. Kwa sababu wao nyasi imeisha na sisi tuna nini? Kwa hivyo kwetu mvua ikinyesha miezi miwili, tuna nyasi ya kutosha. So bwana commissioner, what I would want to say is to encourage our people, sisi tuweke hiyo ngamia na tuweke ng'ombe na tuweke mbuzi. Yao ikije kutana na yetu ikute yetu imejaa huko, yao iondoke iende. Si utajiri utakuwa kwetu. Mali yangu mmesema mambo ya vile tungesaidia. Ukiangalia serikali ya Sudan na Egypt, vile nimesema, mto ni moja tu, inaitwa River Nile. Ile matunda unaiona kwa supermarket hapa imetoka Egypt. Inatoka kwa hiyo mto. Wao wametumia huo mto, serikali ilijitokeza ikasema sisi kama serikali ya Sudan na sisi kama serikali ya Egypt tutaweka pesa ya serikali tuhakikishe ya kwamba maji imefikia watu wetu. Ile pesa inahitajika tuweze kutoa maji Tana River na Athi River ikuje Kitui, sio pesa ya county government ya Malombe. Ni pesa ya serikali kuu. Tungependa kuona serikali kuu ikitenga pesa kama bilioni 300, 400 ituwekee tu mara moja na ituache sisi tuendelee na maisha. Lakini tukisema tuweka na ile ya Malombe, hata nikiwa gavana wenu tukiweka na hiyo hatutaweza. Kwa hivyo we need a very well deliberate move for the national government to lay the infrastructure, the main infrastructure. Ile mtaro kubwa inaleta maji. Wakiweka hiyo hii ingine kidogo waniachie. Itawekea kwa mashamba tulime, tulishe Kenya. Hatulisha sehemu moja. Tulishe wapi? Tulishe Kenya. Ile ingine hii jambo ya kupea watu mbuzi 5 ama kama ile yangu nilipeana mbuzi 2 kwa kila mboma. Hiyo si sustainable. Sasa inakwambia ukienda zile PS mweka alipeana labda sote zimeenda na ukame. Lakini kuna kitu commissioner ameongea juu yake ya maana sana, ningependa watu muisikize. Kitu inaitwa insurance scheme. Yaani serikali iweke pesa ya kuinsure. Ndio mbuzi yako ikikufa, insurance inakulipa, mfue kirudi unanunua mbuzi nyingine unaweka kwa shamba. That is the way to go. That we need a sustainable way. And one of the them is to make sure that we have enough money under that insurance scheme, so that when the drought comes and it kills our goats, then tutaweza restock. Ama serikali wanampangilia kwamba ikiona drought limekuja kulingana na ile shirika lilikuwa limesema mbele yake, tukijua kutakuwa na drought mwezi wa 5, mwezi wa 4 tunanunua hizo mbuzi zote, tunapeleka Athi River, tunachinja, zinakuwa nyama, tunapea mkulima pesa naweka kwa mfuko, mfuko ikianguka anatoa pesa kwa mfuko ananunua nini? Mbuzi tena. Hiyo ndio njia ya kuhakikisha kwamba tumeweka pesa kwa watu wetu na tunawasaidia uchumi nafanya nini? Inapanda. Hakika ndio maswali yalikuwa yameulizwa. Basically tukienda njia hiyo tutakuwa tumesaidia nchi. Lakini sisi waje nikwambie ndugu yangu, sisi kwa sababu sisi ni wanasiasa, Sisi tunasema tumeona mpangilio ya kwamba ni kama serikali zile zimechukua Kenya tangu tuingie tupate uhuru. Kumekuwa na mpangilio wa kuhakikisha wale watu wametoka huko sehemu zimekauka, sisi tukae maskini mpaka kufa kwetu. Na watoto wetu wakae maskini mpaka kufa. Na wajukuu wetu wakae maskini mpaka kufa. Wakati umefika tuseme sisi kama Wakenya, hii ndio nchi yetu. Na sasa hii mahali imefika, wapende wasipende, sisi ndio tutalisha hii nchi. Watupatie maji, watupatie insurance, tusaidie hii nchi songe mbele.
All right, quite interesting. And Commissioner, you had also raised that matter, and I wanted to emphasize on it, that Kitui has a lot of potential, particularly when it comes to pastoralism. It's an pastoral county, but it also has very huge potential in terms of pursuing pastoralism.
Yeah, I would say vile wakati nimekuwa hapa na sija kuwa hapa muda mfupi. Mimi hata nimesomea hii Kitui. Nikiwa mwanafunzi nilikuwa hapa. Na ninajua mvua hata sio vile mheshimiwa anasema miezi 2. Wiki 3, wiki 4. Mvua imetosha ya nyasi. Huo ndio ukweli. Hata ukiangalia ng'ombe na mbuzi saa hii, hamwezi mkasema zimeharibika. Zinaonekana bado ziko na afya. Yule anauza mbuzi yake pale Mudha, hausi kwa sababu ya njaa, anauza kwa sababu anataka kupata nini? Pesa. Na kuna hiyo interaction, kitu ingine nitakwambia, between watu wa Tana River na watu wa Kitui kwa hiyo Mudha market. It drives because of that interaction. The breeds ambazo wako nazo sana sana zimetokea pande hizo. So hiyo uhusiano huwezi kuua kabisa. But sisi sana sana watu wa Kitui hatujashika hiyo mambo ya ufugaji sana. Lakini wakati tunasema kuna kiangazi, mifugo inatoka kutoka hata Bali, Mandela, inaletwa hapa. Kweli kuna kiangazi ya mifugo? Hiyo ni clear indication kwamba kama wewe ungeweka mifugo yako, si bado ungekuwa unapata kitu. Lakini yule alipanda mahindi, nitasema tu vile nimekuwa nikisema, baada ya mwezi mmoja inakuwa kitu kama kitunguu. Haiwezi kumea, mvua inanyesha, haiwezi ifikisha mwisho. Bahati nzuri hapa Central nafikiri wamevunavuna kidogo. Lakini ukiangalia gharama ya kulima eka moja ya mahindi hapa, afadhali uingie sokoni ununue gunia moja kama uko na pesa. Lakini kama ungekuwa na mifugo yako, unauza moja, unapata chakula unaweka kwa nyumba, na zingine zinaendelea kufanya nini? Kulisha. So nikiangalia Kitui iko na 34,000 square kilometers. And the population is around 1.6 million. It is vast. Hatuja kuwa populated. Ranches tunaweza tengeneza easily, because wacha zile ngamia mnasema juu yake, kuna ng'ombe zinatoka pande ya Kajiado zinakuja pande ya Kitui South. So there is a high potential here that is not tapped by locals. But mtu akiwa nje anaiona na anakuja na tap, anatoroka. People are buying land here, and the intention is to have ranches around. Lakini sisi wenyewe hatuja tap hiyo. Labda tufikirie kabla hatujauza mashamba yetu cheaply, tufikirie kile tunaweza fanya ambacho kinaweza stahimili hali ambayo tuko nayo ya ukame wa mara kwa mara. Kwa mimea ndio tunaweza lima ile inakuwa haraka, lakini sana sana ukienda upande wa mifugo, mbuzi na ng'ombe, sanyama, huwezi kosea.
Mheshimiwa Makali, from the point raised by the county commissioner, because sometimes it's a paradigm shift in terms of thought. And sometimes the citizens will need to be shepherded by their political leadership. What role are you going to be playing moving into the future? First of all, crop resistance, having to inculcate the culture of drought-resistant crops, and also importantly, venturing towards that area of pastoralism.
I totally agree with what the commissioner is saying. Actually, all the way from Kitui South, cutting across Kitui East, Mwingi Central, Mwingi North, we would have serious ranches where people can even be having 1,000 goats, 1,000 cows, so long as they are given that the support from the government for them to do that. And they are assured that the keeping of the lands will not be interfered with. So I always say this. From where I sit, this county is a sleeping giant. From where I sit. Hii kaunti yetu hii watu wangu. Hii. Ikiamuka isimame hivi. Kenya itajua kuna kaunti inaitwa Kitui. It's only that, as the commissioner is saying, we have a very huge potential, but I don't think really we have tapped that potential. Now, the way forward, more so agriculture, because I talk about drought.
Yes.
When you look at the latest agricultural policy, which is called agriculture growth and I think it's a sustainability policy, it talks about 3-4 elements. Okay. One element is to ensure that we do commercial farming. How do you do that? You take care of the inputs so that you ensure the seeds are good. You ensure that fertilizer is provided in good time. That's level 1. Level 2 is where you talk about the marketing so that when people produce their products, they can market. Level 3 is now the research component, that our research institutions, the agriculture-related research institutions, need to be constantly to be doing more research so that they know which seed is good for which area. In that case, then it would be improving the productivity of the area. And then last but not least is the extension service. You know, if you remember well, and I'm sure Commissioner can remember because in the old days, ile wizara ya agriculture, simnakumbuka walikuwa wanatuma watu kwa mashamba.
Extension officers.
Extension. Ukipanda namna hii, fanya hivi, na watu walikuwa wanapata chakula. Siku hizi wamepungua sana. Utakuta hata kaunti zingine hawana. Na ndio watu wanasaidia mkulima ili aweze kulima kwa ile njia inafaa. Kwa hivyo ni lazima pia kama kaunti tuhakikishe kwamba tukiamua tunaenda upande wa ufungaji, ni lazima tuhakikishe kuna livestock extension officers. Na wale wanaenda upande wa ukulima sana sana hapa Kitui Central ni kulima, tunapewa agricultural extension officers. Ndio kama consulate hapa ameamua kulima, kuna ule mtu atamsaidia kama ni kitunguu, hii ndio mbegu mzuri, hii ndio ndao wataweka, hii ndio fertilizer wataweka. Tukisaidiana hivyo, tutakuwa tumepata chakula ya kula na ya kuuza. Na watu wetu watapata nini? So I think the way to go is to make sure that the 4 items I've mentioned, extension services, research, input provisions, and the marketing of the product. That will shape us as a county.
As we near closing this matter, County Commissioner, last week the Cabinet approved the release of about 4.1 billion shillings to address the drought situation across the country. Of course, there have been other releases in November. I think in January also there was a release of several billions of shillings to go towards this. But particularly when it comes to Kitui, are you projecting that the numbers will go up? And if they do, how will you respond to it?
Of course, we do periodical evaluation of the situation, or situation appraisal. And the 188,550 that we are talking about is not static.
Okay.
It's subject to whether the rains will come or not. But even if the rains come, the crops cannot be grown and mature at the same time. Yeah. So we expect that the situation may not be good for probably the next 2-3 months. Therefore, probably the next evaluation may also find us in a not a so good situation. Okay. But we can't project figures until the evaluation professionally is done.
But you're adequately prepared if that eventuality comes?
We are prepared and we are advising the government accordingly. We are working closely with the county government, and whatever figures I'm giving, you'll get them also there. Yeah.
Mheshimiwa, as we wind up, I want to paraphrase a citizen I interviewed yesterday from Mwingi, who talked about misplaced priorities and said, ukipata Kisumu kuna street lights, it doesn't mean Kitui ama Mwingi inahitaji street lights. Na akasema nitamulikwa na taa nikiwa na njaa. And I want you to speak to the aspect of misplaced priorities, and not just in Kitui, because even in some of these counties affected by drought, you realize sometimes you see some sense of misplaced priorities. I want you to speak to it as responsible leader.
Now, what has happened, if you look at our constitution, I think it's Article 118, it says that whatever you do for the people, there must be public participation. why the need for public participation. The need for public participation is because the Englishman said, is the wearer of the shoe knows where to pinch is most. So if I live in Kitui, it's only the people who live in Kitui who would know what are their priorities. So if you are a leader and you want to lead the people well and lead them in line with what they want, you need to conduct public participation. And that's why I believe, as you do your county strategic plan, as you do your normal strategic plans, you need to bring on board everyone in that county so that you're able to pick their mind in terms of what do they want. If you go that direction, you'll never get to your priorities. And that's what I would want to encourage Kenyan leaders, that public participation is a constitutional provision, it is mandatory. So just don't wake up in the morning and say, nitawapatia barabara. Usiamuka useme nitawapatia maji. Kwanza uulize, mna haja ya maji. Ukiangalia saa hii, mahali sisi tumekaa saa hii, na commissioner amesema, ile njaa tuko nayo hapa Kitui ya kati, sio ile njaa iko Mwingi North, sio ile njaa iko Mutitu. Kwa hivyo, ukiuliza watu wa Mutitu saa hii wanataka nini, watakwambia labda wanataka chakula. Namba moja. Ukiuliza watu wa Kitui Central, watakwambia tumepata kidogo, saa hii tunahitaji kitu kingine. Kwa hivyo ni lazima kama kiongozi usikize wananchi. But just to sum it up, you know, you asked the commissioner a very difficult question in terms of, he said the situation is likely to worsen because of the numbers. But what is going to happen is, and this is what we are pushing ourselves as members of parliament, we are saying the next supplementary budget, which I'm sure the minister will be bringing to parliament, should be a supplementary budget which is targeted as addressing this national problem. Kwa hivyo kama tulikuwa tumesema tunajenga mabarabara ama tunajenga maji, saa hii ni kubadilisha hiyo pesa, tuseme kwanza tununulie watu wetu chakula ndio to save their lives before we do the roads. Because ukifanya mabarabara na watu wamekufa, nani atapita hiyo barabara? Kwa hivyo wakati tunahimiza CS Mbandi, the minister for the cabinet secretary treasury, that now, as he does this supplementary budget, can he now redirect the resources to address this matter, so that when the county commissioner tells us what wameongezea from 188 to 300,000, we have the resources to address this need. Right. Unless we do that, my friend, we'll be wasting time.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to appreciate the Honorable Makali Mulu, Member of Parliament for Kitui Central, the County Commissioner Kitui, Mr. Erastus Boy, for joining us tonight. Now, audience wetu, asanteni sana kwa kuja. Let's clap for ourselves. Tumefanya kazi nzuri. And thank you for your patience. Tunashukuru sana. I want to hand it back to Brian Kimani for the rest of the special coverage of the drought situation in Kenya. Thank you.
Many thanks, John Jacob Carrier, with that conversation taking place at the Kitui Multi-Purpose Hall. And of course, with the residents there raising pertinent questions. Anyway, as we told you earlier, we were supposed to have the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service and Special Programs. This is Geoffrey Ruku, but he couldn't make it. He is in Embu. But we're in the company of Idris Ahmed. This is the Secretary General of the Red Cross Society of Kenya. We'll continue with the conversation. Let's first of all hear this from you. I mean, we have what we call the early warning system, which is supposed to tell the nation that we're likely to go into a major drought. We have been talking about this since August last year. I remember the early warning system said that the short rains were going to fall by between 30 and 60% in this country. So why are we in a crisis, and where are the county governments in this, bearing in mind that disaster management is both a devolved and a national government assignment?
Yeah. So you are correct in terms of the shared responsibility, constitutional responsibility for disaster management between the counties and the national government. The early warning system, the multi-hazard early warning system, remains the cornerstone of any disaster prevention, disaster response mechanism. How does it work? You get the data around how likely it is going to be bad, and then a series of policy positions are taken, decisions are taken, resources are allocated to support prevention of the worst impact of the forecasted, the situation that we have forecast for. We have a gap between how early warning information, when it is given, and how we act on it. And two main challenges on board. First, we are not allocating resources based on early warning systems. So most of the time we realize we wait for the situation to really get bad before we allocate resources. And that's something that we have to address collectively as a country. And it's not just the public resources allocated at government level, but it's all the resources collectively, including humanitarian resources that come from donors. We are almost always waiting for the situation to get really bad before resources are allocated. What we are pushing for and what we've been advocating for as an institution, as the Kenya Red Cross, it is an early warning system, yes, but it is an early action mechanism where the policy of resource allocation follows warning and that communities are supported to deal with potential hazards way before it gets out of hand. So here we have an issue. As a country, we've come a long way in terms of our multi-hazard early warning, in terms of weather forecast, for example, from the Kenya Met, but we still are lagging behind in terms of how we quickly follow it up with action.
I mean, when you look at, for example, our expenditure on development, and the government has always talked about these, and I have had these in the last 10 years. We are in a situation whereby we spend almost 80% of our revenue on recurrent expenditure. That is at the national level. The county governments are even worse. We have a situation whereby counties are spending more than 95% of their budget on recurrent expenditures. Some counties are spending 0% of their budget on development. When are we going? If this is going to be the situation, if this is going to be the norm, where are we going to get money to build dams, to put up water plants, irrigation systems in this country? Is it a moment that we need to get for reflection?
Yeah, I think that is a deep question for reflection for us as a country. The interventions that are required to support our communities to be able to deal with climate risks are capital intensive in nature. So if we're talking about capturing water, building reservoirs, these are development projects that require intense capital. And I agree with you, and I speak just as a Kenyan, not as the Secretary General of the Kenya Red Cross. As long as our pattern, our financial planning mechanism allocates a huge part of the resources on recurrent expenditure and very little for development projects, then we will not be able to reach the targets that we have. So I agree with you on that. But second and most importantly, we are not climate-proofing our economies. We are still relying a lot on the weather. The weather is having, can have serious impact on the overall economy, whether it is if we have excess floods or whether we have excess drought. So what we need to think about is how, one, we climate-proof the economy, how we focus on sustainable development, with a major concern for the poorest in the country. If we have that combination, then maybe there is hope on coming out of this in the future.
And I like the fact that you're bringing in the issue of drought response. Kenya is home to the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP. We know this for a fact, that drought is a cyclical thing. And the recurrence of drought, is becoming more frequent. About 20 years ago, 30 years ago, drought used to occur in a span of a decade. Now it is recurring after every 1 to 2 to 3 years. And the situation is getting worse because of changing climatic conditions. You can be guaranteed that 2, 3, or 4 years from now, we are going to discuss the issue of drought. How then do we put resources where we need to in order to mitigate against the impact of drought in the coming years?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The challenge that we have is a national conversation, but it's also an international conversation. And it's an international conversation around climate change, the impact of climate change, who ought to bear responsibility for this impact. We have to understand that Africa, Kenya, Africa, and some of the poorest developing countries are bearing the brunt of climate change, the impact of climate change. the cause of which is something that they've had the least contribution to. If we're talking about emissions as a whole, we've had the least contribution to that globally. The conversation at the international level has always been, we have a shared responsibility to address climate change, but we also have a differentiated burden. And the differentiated burden has been that the developed countries, who are the major cause of the global emissions, and by extension, climate change, ought to put resources on the table to support the communities who are being affected most to prepare for and to deal with climate change. The challenge that we have now is between 2020 and 2025, the developed world has promised the developing countries over $600 billion to support them in adaptation. Very little resources have been availed in terms of that. As we speak, our economies are suffering the brunt of the global impact of climate change. In some economies, by the way, every year they lose as much as 3 to 4% of their total GDP as a result of extreme weather events. And that is not sustainable in terms of the development of our countries. So there are certain policy decisions, implementations that have to be taken at the regional level. I mean, at the subnational level, at the county level. Some need to be taken at the national level. But more importantly, we have to have a global conversation around what are we thinking about in terms of the future. Every year that we have an increase in global warming means that there are more communities in Wajir, in Turkana, in West Pokot, in Garissa, who will have to face the consequences. And therefore, it worries me and it worries many of us that we are not having sufficient conversation around how do we tackle global emissions as a whole. We are not having sufficient conversation around how do we sufficiently invest in resources and funding mechanisms that were meant to support poorest communities adapt to climate change, the loss and damage, for example, the damage and loss fund, for example, or the total money for climate financing. And these are conversations that we will be continuing to push for at different levels.
We should be going to Wajir County, where our reporter Farah is on standby to give us a brief on what exactly is happening down there. But before we go there, I just want to hear this from you in brief. The world is now talking about ecological engineering. I want you to put your thoughts on that. But before you respond to that question, let's first of all go to Modogashe, where our reporter Farah is on standby to give us an update or a situational report on the situation in that county. Farah, if you can hear me, what do you want the nation to know at this point?
Good evening, O'Brien. Back there at the broadcasting house, like you rightly put it, we are in Modogashe, where in the last couple of days we have been in the county of Wajir, where we've been covering the drought situation and its effect on the people, the livestock, and in the education sector rather. And right off the bat, from the moment you start entering Wajir, from the town that is called Habaswein, which is in Wajir South constituency, we were welcomed by carcasses of animals, goats, sheep and cows that have died due to the ongoing drought. And of course, this is a huge loss on the area residents in the county, of course, knowing that there are pastoralists who depend hugely on their livestock, for their livelihoods, to be able to take their kids to school and of course to be able to do business. What really made these livestock owners sad, or rather feel at loss, is the fact that they once owned livestock that was very healthy, and in the trading market they used to go for up to 10,000 shillings, but due to the drought the prices have dropped tragically to 600 shillings. You can imagine going from 10,000 shillings to 600 shillings. So they are facing losses, but of course, if they can make even some little money to be able to fend for themselves and their families, they of course, will accept it. And in the education sector, this is a sector that has recorded a number of dropouts, especially in Wajir County, where most students are not able to go back to school, some due to lack of finances because their parents cannot afford to take them back to school as they have no livestock to sell. But then for others, they have been forced to move with their families. They are pastoralists in nature, so when their families move in search of pasture, they end up moving with them. A number of school heads that we were able to speak to say, noticing the gaps in class, when you see empty desks, of course, it takes a toll on you, the morale on the teacher, and of course, they feel concerned because while others are going or are ongoing with their learning process, some are missing this opportunity, and of course, being that education is widely known as an equalizing factor. We were also able to visit a number of hospitals where we've seen cases of malnutrition. The ones that are adversely affected are children below 5 years. So of course there are interventions that are being done by the county government, but more is being called for to be done, because the people there are saying that if the drought continues to persist in the livestock sector, there might be more deaths. And of course, in the market, the prices might drop further, and this is a loss. In the education sector, headmasters of schools are saying the number of dropouts might go on, and in a worst case scenario, some schools might end up being closed. And of course, in the hospital, there's calls for help. So state agencies, non-state agencies, every well-wisher is being called upon to come to the aid of the people of Wajir County. And of course, this is something that is happening in other counties as well that are being affected. But we'll have the stories that have been filed by me and my colleague Adel Ibrahim to explain the story in an in-depth manner. But for our viewers, keep it KBC Channel 1. But right about now, we'll take a break. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Yes, hello. Naongea na Jen.
Naongea na nani?
Yes, Jen. Tuko hapa kwako tunakata stima. Hii bili yako hujalipa.
Ai, kwani mnakata stima na Friday afternoon?
Yes, madam. Tunafanya kazi kila siku. Lakini usikuwe na wasiwasi. Hapa tunaweza saidia.
When the deal is too good, think twice.
Hii ni kuhatarisha maisha yenu nyi wenyewe na pia ya wale mnaenda kutokea kwa manyumba zao.
We are diving into the mind. Stay vigilant to get safely and legally connected to the power grid.
Koti hii imewapata na hatia, na mkiwa mkuridhika na uamuzi wa koti, mko na siku 14 za kurudisha apili.
Na kama kuna mtu anakupigia akidai ati kwamba uko na deni, kata hiyo simu haraka.
Kumbe mlikuwa mnataka tu mniponge.
Tumekuja kuwashika, muda bosi utamulikwa. Tumekuja kuwashika.
Welcome back. You are watching our special report on the drought situation in the country. And just to sample a little bit of your views, we have Lewis Misiani. You say you're asking a question. I hope my colleague O'Brien will get the Red Cross lead head there to answer. You're saying, what are the long-term plans? What long-term plans does the government have for the people of northern Kenya? And that politics is killing innocent Kenyans. You also say that misplaced priorities is affecting the growth of communities. We also have Esther Ochola. You're saying that very pertinent issues there. It's high time the government embraces early actions to protect vulnerable communities from these adverse impacts of extreme weather events attributed to climate change. Thank you for your views there. Of course, remember, you can always get in touch with us. You can comment on our live stream on YouTube. You can also get in touch with us on X, on Facebook, on Instagram. We are at KBC Channel 1. We move on to more drought updates. The ongoing drought is forcing pastoralist families in Wajir County to make impossible choices. The families are on the move in search of greener pastures, leaving behind empty desks in schools where the children would on a normal day be sitting to quench their thirst for education. And as our reporter Yusuf Farah reports, urgent interventions are needed before learning in the schools that are reporting an average 20 dropouts since reopening for the first time grind to a halt.
Tahira Primary School in Wajir East constituency. This water truck couldn't come at a better time, given that this learning institution is among the many grappling with the effects of the current drought situation being experienced in the county. Every drop of water in this underground tank means every learner in this 394 capacity school is retained and literally quench the thirst for education. There are, however, a few empty desks.
Approximately almost 20 learners not reported to the school as we open the school this term.
Wajir County has been classified to be at the alert stage, and the trend is likely to worsen, according to the Kenya Red Cross Society. However, interventions such as this play a critical role in keeping these learners in school. Some schools are, however, not so lucky. At the Dilmanyale Primary School in Wajir South constituency, learning is ongoing, but there is a silent fear. The school's 3,000-litre capacity tank has run out of the precious commodity.
We use it for cooking. The children drink. Even the staff members are drinking this water. We plant water some trees. We overuse it.
Refilling this tank requires at least 2,500 shillings, a bill that the school has to foot for things to continue running. Deputy Headmaster Mohammed Hussein says just like Tahira Primary School, Dilmanyale is grappling with the effects of the drought.
When the parents live with the animals, some of the children even go after their parents. They just go and look for their parents because some of the children in this school, some of them are very young.
Just like the learners, the teachers are affected too.
We have in mind that some of the learners are away and they are supposed to cover the syllabus, those who are present and those who are away. Definitely that will lower your morale.
And the parents fear that lack of urgent intervention might make things more challenging.
Maneno ya malnutrition itakuwa hapa na maneno ya pia parents kuhama watoto dropout itakuwa double.
El Ado Primary School, also in Wajir East, is facing similar problems. So what is the Wajir County government doing to address challenges posed by the drought?
We have close to about 154 centers that we are doing the water tracking to ensure that people, at least in various centers who have no water, are able to get the precious commodity.
Teachers are trying their best to cover any lost lesson or any child who is absent. They are given extra coaching or remedial lessons.
Data from the Wajir County Rapid Assessment Report had indicated that the poor performance of the October, November, December rains will impact negatively on the county, with fears that many learners may fail to return to school on time as they may be engaged in fetching water and caring for livestock. This has now come to pass.
We'll have the county government to continue and put more effort in giving out this water tracking, also in school feed for the ECD children.
With water resources drying up and livestock dying, families are finding it difficult to make ends meet. For a majority of them, this means taking out their children from school to help them find food for the family and pasture for the livestock. Their fear is if no urgent intervention is brought, the things might take a turn from bad to worse. Yusufar reporting for Prime Edition in the county of Wajir.
From Wajir, we now move to Tana River County, and failure of the long rain season of March, April, May, and the late onset of, as well as erratic and early cessation of the short rain season of October to December 2025 in Tana River County has led to widespread crop failure, lack of pasture, and increased pressure on water resources for humans, livestock, and wildlife. Our reporter Kasichana Masha visited the county and tells us the story of the unfolding catastrophe.
Tana River County is an agro-pastoral county. The county is currently at the alert phase of the drought orchestrated by drying up of surface water sources.
Tana North, Bangale, parts of Tana River, parts of Tana Delta, and Darasa and Gali Delta is also worst affected in the county.
Over 185,000 people are in need of food assistance, with about 515,000 heads of cattle affected. The situation has led to the migration of livestock keepers who are moving close to the riparian areas of River Tana.
Nimetoka upande ya Gururi kwa sababu ya ukame. Huku kuanzia huku mpaka hapa ni 30 kilomita. Ukame huku umezidi.
This has forced tens of children to drop out of school.
Unakuta hawa watoto sasa hata wamekosa masomo yao kwa sababu wana move na ile mifugo yao na watoto hakuna mahali ya kuachwa.
The only source of feed at the maize stocks are the Tana irrigation scheme. This is possible through formal agreements between the farmers and the pastoralists.
Ndio watu wakawa kule juu, ngombe zinakufa, zingine zimeenda Savo East anasumbuana na KWS, zingine zimeenda Bura irrigation scheme, zingine zimekuja Hola, zingine zimeenda Delta.
Wakati sisi tunavuna tukaondoka, na sisi tunaruhusu mfugo waingie wapate chakula.
Unakuta msimu kama huu wa kuharvest kuna ada kidogo ambacho wakulima wamekubaliana na wafugaji ya kutokea 1,500 mpaka 2,000 kwa eka.
However, the Tana irrigation scheme manager expresses fears that if the drought persists, then the scheme will not sustain the large number of herds moving into the area.
We take initiative of sensitizing farmers, sensitizing livestock farmers also to come together and we agree so that at least all of us we benefit from whatever we get from our farm.
In Gao village of Tana Delta, the grim reality of the drought is evident as human-wildlife conflict threatens the local livelihood, agribusiness.
After a short period of time, when our crops were about to mature, we experienced elephants invasion.
Watu hawezi kuendelea kwa sababu ya hao ndovu, na imekuwa ni changamoto kubwa sana, sababu hata mtu wenyewe pia umekauka.
Kenya Wildlife Service plans to increase surveillance, including pushing the troubled animals back into Tsavo.
We have talked to our headquarters and it is in the process of providing a chopper so that we can at least locate where the elephants are and try to push them back to Tsavo.
But all is not lost as the community says solutions are available.
Hii mito yote ambayo ni seasonal rivers wakati wa mvua maji inapita chini. Wapate kutengeneza dams kule juu kubwa kubwa za kuhold hiyo maji.
We are asking the government through NIH to expand more so that we get more tonnage or more yields in our irrigation scheme so that in order for us to feed the country.
The expected poor performance of the long rain season of March, April and May spells doom to lives and livelihoods in Tana River County. Reporting from Tana River County for Prime Edition, my name is Kasichana Masha.
Sahi, ukidao *419# option 4 ama uingie kwa tushinde.com, hakuna probox. Jaribu.
Ni ukweli. Yaani nimeshaingia na ndio tunafieka. Ya inaona iko ndani. Wanaongelea nini hao? Ni shamba. Na sio moja, sio mbili, shamba 3 hapa Juja. Very nice. Na ni area moja development na growth iko promising sana. Stima iko ndani. Hiyo. Maji inapatikana. Wow. Security iko sawa na all basic amenities zinapatikana. Shamba ni 3 na kuingia kwa draw ili kujishindia moja kati ya shamba hizi 3 ni 35 bob pekee. Na mtu akitaka zote 3, iko special ticket ya kuweza kujishindia shamba zote 3 kwa tikiti moja ya 99 bob pekee. Hata hiyo, na barabara ni nywe mpaka kwa ploti yako na kila ploti is worth 1.5 million Kenyan shillings. Hii 2026 hatuland tu, tunaland mara 3 na tushinde.com au *419# option 4. Au umesema vizuri sana. Wewe fieka. Na fieka.
Je, wewe ni mpenda soka? Na je, wajua kuwa KBC mwenzio wako wa dhati michezoni anakujali? Ndio maana KBC Channel 1 hukuletea taarifa na uchambuzi wa soka.
Kafu ndio wamechukua usukani
humu nchini, barani Afrika na ugaibuni, ikiwemo EPL, Serie A, Bundesliga na ligi zingine. Mashabiki pia hutuzwa kwa kujibu maswali kuhusiana na soka.
Swali letu la leo.
Haya yote ni kwenye kipindi cha Dunda Dunda kwenye KBC Channel 1 kila Ijumaa kuanzia saa 5 asubuhi hadi saa 6:30 mchana.
Na ni za Wakenya waendelee ku watch Dunda Dunda show.
KBC, mwenzio wa dhati michezoni.
Welcome back. You are watching our special report on the drought situation in the country. And now from Tana River, we would like to wrap this up. My colleague O'Brien Kimani will be fielding some questions there in the interview. O'Brien, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Betty Poom. We continue with our conversation here with the Secretary General for the Kenya Red Cross Society, Dr. Ahmed Idris. And of course, we are going to field some of the questions that have been raised by our viewer here. You're watching a special coverage of the ongoing drought here in Kenya. We're looking at the preparedness and, of course, the impact it is having on the local communities. We have just watched a very harrowing situation that is unfolding in the counties of Wajir and Tana River counties. And you're from Garissa County, Dr. Idris. Its neighbors, Wajir to the north, if my map is fine. And it's quite disheartening when you look even at the school infrastructure in that area, and yet you expect the children there to compete with children in Nairobi, in Mombasa, in other areas. When you engage with the county leadership as Red Cross, and I'm talking about all the 23 ASAL counties, and when you listen to them about spending on priority areas, what do they say?
That's a very difficult question. Let's summarize it this way. First, we have a problem. We have a problem around whether we are allocating sufficient resources to address the root causes of the vulnerability around communities, as we said earlier. Let's agree that the vulnerability is not from the lack of rain, it is the other accumulated factors. Mm-hmm. If that is the case, then there is a serious question around whether the subnational entities, famously known as county governments, are putting their best foot forward. And that's a conversation that we ought to all have generally. But even as we do, we have to remember that the county governments are relatively young in terms of how many years they've been operating. Mm-hmm. In some of the counties, we are talking about situations, over 45 years of independence, extreme marginalization. We cannot expect that there will be a complete turnaround in 15 years since we adopted the new constitution. So there's also an expectation issue. But do we have concerns around whether resources are being used, allocated in the right way? All of us as Kenyans have these concerns and conversations that we ought to have. Mm-hmm. What disturbs me most is whether the resources we are allocating at a national level are sufficient to address some of the deeply built vulnerabilities that these communities are facing. And that's the discussion we were having around whether we are allocating sufficient resources for development work, whether between the formulas that we are using in resource allocation, we are allocating sufficient resources to the counties as a whole, and between the counties, whether we are allocating sufficient resources to those counties. Mm-hmm. An example is a county like Lamu. In terms of the range of risks that they face, the poverty levels, the insecurity, I've always asked myself the question on whether that budget that is allocated will do anything meaningful in terms of addressing that level. So there has to be a concerted effort between the work being done at the national level, the national government, and the work that is being done at the county level.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about ecological engineering,
yeah,
which is now taking roots in the global, on the global stage. And we were, let's take, for example, the case of China. And when you look at the desert, one of the driest deserts in the world is Taklamakan. They've managed to plant billions of trees, reversing ecological degradation to a point whereby that region now, has more trees. And because of this, they are receiving a lot of rains. And because of the rains, they are now managing to plant a lot of food. When you look at the 23 ASAL counties in Kenya, is it possible for us, or is it possible to undertake an ecological engineering where we become more purposeful, more dedicated, more committed in planting trees and doing afforestation?
It's not just possible, it's something that we must do. I think ecological engineering and the entire conversation around it is simply having an honest discussion that years of human interaction with nature has caused such serious negative impact that we have a role to play to reverse that. We have to have a positive interaction with nature. We have to have an interaction that is sustainable, and that is something that we must do. In many of these counties where we come from, if you just look a few years back, some of these areas were dry, but they were not as dry as they are now. Some of these areas don't have trees. The impact is from years of cutting down trees, making charcoal, using firewood, just human impact, negative impact on the environment. So even as we blame, developed countries for climate change, we have to have our own discussion at local level on how we are interacting with nature, whether it is a sustainable level of interaction, whether our children and their children will benefit from what nature offers.
Very well.
And that's a conversation that we have to have.
Very good. And of course, it requires us to look at the man in the mirror. As we wind up this conversation, I want to hear this from you. The next drought is as sure as death. We know it's going to come. We don't know. Maybe 1 year from now, 2 years or 3 years. In a minute from now, I want to hear from you. What do we need to do so that we do not see the kind of images that are coming from Wajir, Tana River, and all the other counties?
Look, I think we have to invest in community resilience. We have to invest in the ability of the communities to withstand these shocks. And that requires a certain level of investment in their livelihoods, diversify their livelihoods. We have to invest in proper development projects that not only capture water but are used for food production. So we have to be very purposive around building the capacity of the communities to withstand the shocks. As long as our policy planning mechanism assumes that communities will survive on their own, then every drought will continue to have this kind of impact in their lives. And as you said, the certainty that we have around climate change is that the wet periods will be extremely wet, causing floods, and the dry periods will be extremely dry, causing drought. And we have to collectively have a discussion as a nation on what are the meaningful interventions we need to have to support our communities to be able to come out of that here.
Very good. Dr. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us tonight, and of course for spending almost 2 hours with us here and giving us your take on the ongoing situation in Kenya.
Thank you for having me.
Your time is highly appreciated.
Thank you.
I mean, I tell you what, drought is dehumanizing. Drought is debilitating. And of course, drought is degrading. We can't claim to move forward if some of our communities are hungry and dying of hunger. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. You have been watching a special coverage of the ongoing drought situation in Kenya. We're taking you to Betty Kiptum in Studio A for the wrap-up of the show. Thank you. Have a good night. Back to you, Betty Kiptum.
Thank you, O'Brien Kimani, and of course, thank you for that interview with the Secretary General in charge of the Kenya Red Cross, just giving us an overview of the solutions that we can put in place to ensure that the drought is managed and the impacts of climate change are also mitigated, and that communities are adapting to these changes that are happening. Of course, we do thank you for your valued company, and we hope that these conversations do not stop here, that they continue and that solutions are put in place. My name is Betty Kiptum, and Byron Abuli there is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. And from the entire team that made this broadcast possible, we do wish you a lovely night and thank you for your company. Bye-bye.
Saa hii ukidial *419# option 4 ama uingie kwa tushinde.com, hakuna probox. Jaribu.
Ni ukweli. Yaani nimeshaingia na ndio tunafyeka. Hiyo inaona iko